Today, the United States of America will decide who becomes president for another 4 years. Incumbent President Donald Trump is facing off with former Vice President Joe Biden in a gutsy race for the White House. President Trump is running to get re-elected on the platform of the Republican Party, while Mr. Biden, the Democratic Party candidate, is trying to secure a quick return to the White House, having served as number 2 man to immediate past President Barack Obama for 8 years until 2016. Both men have spent the past few days canvassing for last-minute votes in the battleground and traditional swing states. An analysis of all the issues involved will now be talking to Arise London correspondent and special U.S. political analyst, LAURIE LAIRD. LAURIE, good morning. Good to have you join us on the morning show.
Good morning.
Well, very quickly, LAURIE, what's your projection about the presidential election? Who do you think is likely to win at the end of the day? And for what reasons? Is it Biden or President Trump?
I feared that you might ask this, and I'm not going to touch this one. Here's the one prediction I am willing to make. I suspect we will not have a winner by the end of the day. Now, one of the big phenomena of this election has been the outstanding number of people who have voted early or by postal vote, some by early voting in person. We think that about 70% of the turnout from the 2016 election has already voted, either by postal vote or in person early voting. This is a big change from other elections. And the thing that makes this complicated is some states, the individual 50 states in the U.S. all run their own election laws. Some of those states are banned by law from beginning to tabulate those early votes until today. So I think the one thing I'm comfortable predicting is that we may not, unless there's a landslide vote either way, I don't think that we will have a winner before we go to bed tonight or before America goes to bed tonight. In a couple of key swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, all of those early votes cannot begin to be tabulated until today. It will take a long time to count these early votes. Pennsylvania in particular is a key state. It could be a swing state. The election could be decided with Pennsylvania and its 20 electoral votes. Electoral officials in Pennsylvania are saying that they hope to have a result by Friday.
It's safe there. I take you're not a betting woman. Well, neither am I. But let's talk about the issue, which supposedly is the COVID-19 pandemic and President Trump's handling of it. Would you say that President Trump has managed in his sort of Jedi mind trick attempt to push that off the front burner and focus instead on what he would describe as his gains with the economy, foreign policy, and what have you? Or is the electorate stubbornly focused on COVID-19?
You have just asked the crucial question. It's an excellent question because that has been the Trump strategy. Get away from COVID and let's talk about the economy. And even people who support Biden, Democratic voters, tend to give Trump more credit on the economy. He is definitely viewed as a better steward of the economy. One thing that's really interesting here is that Donald Trump is running on, on the economic recovery, and we have seen him on the stump over the past couple of days saying that in the third quarter of 2020, the U.S. experienced the biggest rebound on earth, greatest economy you've ever seen in Donald Trump terms. We've seen this from him. We've seen it from Joe Biden, Mike Pence as well. But let me put that number, that recovery in the third quarter, that 33.1% that we hear both of the candidates talking about, please let me put that in perspective. America looks at GDP growth in a unique way. They take the GDP for a 3-month period and annualize it. So look at growth over that 3-month period and extrapolate if that growth were to extend through a 12-month period. Most countries look at quarter-on-quarter GDP growth. So if we look, so we've seen Donald Trump talking about this 33% growth in the third quarter. If we look at that on a quarter by quarter basis, growth was 7.4%. In the Eurozone, it was 12.4%. So this isn't the greatest recovery on earth. It certainly is an outstanding recovery, growth of 7% quarter on quarter in the third quarter, but it isn't as high as what we've seen in the Eurozone. So this Trump economic miracle may not be quite what it is when you look at it, when you measure it on a metric that most other countries use.
Right, Laurie, I mean, for the sake of fair coverage, let's talk about candidates of other parties apart from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Because historically, when you look at the American elections, you've always had that, you know, other candidates that can fritter away a couple of votes. I'll give you a clear instance. 92, it was Ross Perot. He ran as an independent, got some quite handsome votes that if Bush Sr. had got, he would have won that election. In 2000, was a certain consumer rights activist called Ralph Nader that got about 1 million votes while Al Gore and Bush Jr. were going head-to-head. So do you have other smaller candidates like that in these elections for the sake of fairness?
You know, that's an excellent question. And there isn't a third party or fourth party candidate in any states that can draw away from the two main parties. And I'm so glad you mentioned this, because they're in particularly last time around in Wisconsin and Michigan, the Green Party and the Libertarian Party together in both of those states took more votes than the margin of victory that Trump had over Hillary Clinton. And this is a fascinating point. The margin of victory in Michigan last time around was 10,000 votes, almost nothing. The Green Party and the Libertarian Party, between them, had close to 100,000 votes. This was also the case in Wisconsin. So hadn't had those third and fourth party votes in those two states, we may have been looking at a different outcome. There aren't any third or fourth party significant candidates this time around. So we do expect that the voting will go mainly to the Republican and the Democratic Party. But you brought up a very interesting point.
Well, Laurie, let me put that differently. I mean, we have in this election, as at 9th October, about 1,216 presidential candidates. Some of those candidates, they also understand, I guess, that this is a two-way race usually between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. How does that work? Why will anybody say, I want to be a president, knowing that they do not stand any chance? But the other issue that I would like to raise with you, there have been speculations about a threat of violence, outbreak of violence, whichever way that election goes. Is that something we really have to worry about, or it wouldn't matter?
I think that there is a very valid concern that if there is not an elector, a victor declared by the end of today, that there could be violence. And I have many, my sources in America are all desperately concerned about this, not least because Donald Trump tweeted overnight about the risk of violence if there is not a victor today. And Donald Trump has done his best to throw this election under question. And there are many, many concerns that there could be violence on the streets if this election does not go Donald Trump's way. And I think many cooler heads are hoping for a landslide one way or the other, so that there isn't a tight election race, so that so there aren't dog whistle calls for supporters of either side to go out on the streets.
It's really quite worrying, isn't it? Because what's the likelihood of a landslide when you have quite a popular incumbent, love him or hate him? He does have his own solid base at this point. And can you tell us sort of obstacles that he might face on the road to 270 electoral votes at the very least, seeing as the Electoral College is generally perceived to favor Republican candidates?
Absolutely, it really is, because the Electoral College tends to give slightly more weight to rural communities. Democrats tend to be bunched up in cities where the Republicans are more spread out over bigger land masses. Look, we're looking at polls at the moment that show roughly a 10-point lead for Joe Biden. But if we look state by state, some of these races are a lot tighter, particularly when we get to those key swing states. Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. Florida at the moment is showing a statistical tie. Florida will be a crucial state to watch as voting comes in later today. Donald Trump took it in a real surprise result in 2016. Florida is also crucial because we will probably get that result sometime on the 3rd of November, U.S. time. Florida electoral laws will allow the vote to be counted. All of those early votes in Florida have been tabulated. So we should get a result in Florida late today. Keep an eye on that one. Pennsylvania, Joe Biden is showing, is leading the polls, but not as much as he is nationally. We'll have to keep an eye on that one. As I said earlier, we might not get a result in Pennsylvania until later this week. But you're talking about the path to victory. I'm not confident that the national polls, which show Biden so far ahead, will be replicated tonight. I think that there could be some tight races in a lot of places. Certainly, the Democrats' strategy has been to ensure that Democrats actually get out and vote, particularly in some of the swing states like Michigan, like Wisconsin. And I think that's one reason that we saw Barack Obama campaigning side by side with Joe Biden over the weekend in the state of Michigan. I think the Democrats are, and so many Democratic activists have said, we are suffering from PTSD, from post-traumatic stress syndrome after the loss in 2016. Democrats thought they were cruising to victory with Hillary Clinton, and turnout, particularly amongst African Americans, was not what the Democrats would have liked. And in fact, if African American turnout in 2016 in Michigan, in Wisconsin, had been what it had been in 2008 and 2012, Hillary Clinton may have won the election. The Democrats are trying to make sure that all of their supporters get out and vote. That has been the Democratic strategy over the past couple of weeks.
Right. So I've just got two quick insights and questions. The first one will be, is there a possibility that exit polls can call it? You know, because the first time exit poll was used in the 84 elections that had Reagan and Walter Mondale. Is it a possibility that exit polls can start to call it this night? And secondly, I want to talk about the mathematics of the margin of error when it comes to polling. Take, for instance, a state like Pennsylvania that says that Joe Biden is 5 points clear, but when you look at it critically, there's a margin of error of plus or minus 4.
Absolutely right, and that you're really picking up a very good reason why we should take the polls with a grain of salt, perhaps a shaker of salt this time around. And I'm glad that you brought up exit polls because, look, almost 70% of the turnout in 2016 has already voted. So where we have exit polls, we'll be looking at, and that varies from state to state, but nationally, we should see somewhere along the lines of 30% of the 2016 turnout will be going to the polls today. So when we see exit polls, it will be for a much, much smaller section of the electorate. So any exit polls that we see, we have to take with a grain of salt. Historically, Democrats have tended to take advantage of early voting more than Republicans have had. So if that trend holds, people who go to the polls today may be overwhelmingly Republican rather than Democrats. So again, you have to keep that in mind when we see exit polls today. I'd also like to say, look, because of all of this early voting, because of coronavirus, polling models have never had these sorts of inputs. Polling models are only as good as the assumption that go into these models. So I think we need to take all polling with a grain of salt this time around. This is such a unique election.
Well, thank you very much, Laurie, for joining us on the morning show.